Welcome, teacher friend. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two literacy educators in Baltimore. We want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
Our district recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which meant a lot of change for everyone. Lori and I can't wait to keep learning about literacy with you today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy Podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about literacy and leaders, and we have two incredible leaders here with us. Melissa, I know we did our pre-call last week, so I've been very excited all weekend to talk with both of them. How are you feeling?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we're big fans of Unbound Ed, and we've had a few people from Unbound Ed on before, but super excited to have our friend Andrea from Baltimore, who we knew for a while, and then of course Lacey Robinson, who I think she's kind of famous, right?
I think you are. Yes. I think Andrea is famous too. I think they're both famous. Is what I'm going to throw down. So Andrea and Lacey, excited. Welcome to the podcast. Would you, Andrea, why don't you go first, since your name is first in the alphabet, and that's totally a random thought. Would you introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you do for Unbound Ed?
Yes, sure. And it is first in the alphabet. Thank you for noticing. Andrea Hancock. I am currently the Deputy Chief of Program Design and Development at Unbound Ed. That just means I have the pleasure of leading the team that creates the materials that we use when we do external engagement. So all of the programmatic offerings, our team designs and develops for. Before Unbound Ed, I had an opportunity to serve as a school leader, district level leader, supervising school leaders. And my favorite was a teacher. I was a first grade teacher before all of that started and loved first grade. So shout out to all of the first grade teachers out there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Lacey Robinson, President and CEO of Unbound Ed. That just means I get the pleasure of supporting folks like Andrea and her other colleagues in the organization, in leading what we call the way to justice in the details of teaching and learning. And like Andrea, before I got started here, I've been a building principal. I've worked at the district level, but my all-time favorite is kindergarten and second grade. That was my all-time favorite teaching. I got a little love for pre-K too. That's how I started my career.
Oh, we have a nice through line, Lace.
I was going to say, you always span those early years.
The primary grades are just coming in strong with you two. Oh, well, we're so grateful that you're both here to talk about leadership and literacy and what that means for everybody listening, especially our teachers who are in the classroom doing all the good work that we just can't lift up enough. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to let her kind of frame and ask the first question to you both.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had Alice and Brandon on in October, and we talked then about, what do you do in the classroom for equity that's related to literacy instruction, right? What can you do in the classroom? And at that time, we were actually talking to Andrea a little bit, and we said, well, what do leaders do, right? What can I do if I am at a leadership level that's not just in the classroom, but what can I do at the leadership level to build equity through instruction for literacy? And so that's really the big overarching question, and where we'll start today. Mm-hmm. So what do you all suggest for leaders as they're thinking about those two things, literacy and equity?
Lacey, you want me to kick us off?
Sure.
Okay. So when I think about leaders who have the opportunity to support teachers who are in the classroom, it is important that we model the way for what that literacy instruction looks like. Coutts and Posner's, who wrote the 5 leadership challenges, has 5 principles. And of the principles, 2 of them, modeling the way and inspiring to share visions, are the ones that I would lean on. That looks like being in it with the teachers, not necessarily sitting on an edict and giving directions from top down, but learning alongside the teachers and supporting the teachers in the implementation of what it takes to move our students forward. One of the practices that we used when I was a building leader was the cycles of professional learning. Targeted Leadership was the organization that supported us with Dr. Jeff Nielsen. And it's also an article that's listed on EdTrust's site on how to implement the cycles of professional learning. And we focused on literacy. I don't know, I can keep going about what that cycle looked like if you want, or I can pause right there and come back to it. Totally.
I would love to hear about it, but Lacey, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think the cycles are important. I think it's important for leaders to have an established way of being able to assess where the learning is going and determine what is needed in order to support the staff, right, around where the learning is going. But I was going to say that even before I think about building leadership, the ultimate leadership to me is the teacher that's standing in front of the kids, right? Mm-hmm. Like at the end of the day, whatever decisions that the system makes, whatever decisions that the principal is supporting from the system, the ultimate, I would say, flowing is through the classroom teacher. And here's the thing I think we don't always empower teachers around. That even if you don't have a career trajectory to become a building leader or to become a system leader, you are a leader in that classroom. And there are mm-hmm. moments as a teacher, many moments where you feel powerless. And the thing that I love about our work that we do is that we remind and ignite teachers of the power that they actually have. The power in the knowledge of the understanding of what teaching reading is and how to teach reading, the power of the content, the power of the pedagogy, the power of knowing and understanding the standards and their staircase of complexity. And so when I think of leadership, I want to ultimately go back to who is holding the ultimate power, and that's the teacher.
Lacey, that's where I'm sorry. No, you just got me excited, because that is exactly the reason why we chose to lean in on the cycles of professional learning, for that reason, to distribute the power to where it should be within the teachers, being able to set the parameter before we go in and do observation. So like the cycle, the way it's designed and it starts is we identify what area do we need to figure out as our focus. And so for us, we started with fluency. A lot of the teachers had kids that were reading and they were word calling, but not necessarily comprehending. And it was a generalization of, oh yeah, they're fluent. But did we really understand about the accuracy, the rate, the prosody that it took to understand what it meant for fluency? So we decided to focus on prosody, because before that, I had no idea what is prosody then. I didn't know what that was. So we learned about the intonation, expression, and how that matters for being able to comprehend. And the way we did that was through finding time for teachers to get articles that we vetted as a leadership team. And we said, hey, there's a cadre of articles we like to share. What does this look like for enactment within your classroom? We're going to provide safe practice. This was something at our school teachers had never heard of. What is safe practice? You mean you aren't going to come in and put a hammer down and say, this isn't right, this is wrong? No, we're going to give time for you to learn and understand and grapple with your peer teachers, and even support from coaches as requested before we come in, and have some professional reading opportunities. We only did 2 articles. The model calls for up to 4, but we wanted to go deeper instead of across initially to start. So we leaned on 2 research-based practices and articles, and allow teachers to then develop scheduling. And this is where the leadership came in, provided the schedule to say, here's time for you to do some peer reflections. Melissa, I think that was your kitty. Was that your kitty?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, kitty. Oh, the kitty was affirming me. Thank you, kitty.
That's right.
Tell the Andrea,
right? Some peer reflections where we use either the Japanese lesson study model, or just an opportunity to go in and see, what does this look like? You've written out your lesson and what you think it should be, and you've adapted it to meet the needs of your students. How does this look in other classrooms with peers who are in it with you? And then we came back together to say, here's the data from this. And now like Lacey said, now that you've had the opportunity to lead through this teacher, we as administrators will come in to give you informal feedback on walkthroughs, to modify, to affirm what's going right, to name where it isn't with explicit feedback on data to say, here it is. And we'll come back in 2 weeks to see where you are then. So it wasn't a great check off and let's move on to the next thing. It was a spiral or cycle, if you will, to unpack the fluency. And it definitely helped.
It's very collaborative, Andrea. Yes?
Yes, very much so. The teachers, to Lacey's point, have buy-in along the way, and they have agency to say, actually, this isn't working for my students. Here's why, and let's see what we can do differently.
I imagine there's so much power in that, especially when teachers have high quality materials. And because often I think teachers feel like, okay, I'm doing this, but it needs something. And it's hard for me in the moment to zoom out and see what that is and have that aerial view. But with you as a really supportive administrator in that cycle with them, I imagine that would be like an incredibly helpful resource to them.
Yeah. And I was thinking too, with, especially like you said, with instructional materials, I think unfortunately what is seen a lot in leaders is, we have these materials. I'm going to come in and make sure you're doing it, the way it says it's supposed to be done. Right. And like that's what I felt most as a teacher is like, I'm just coming in to check off and make sure you're following the rules. Right. And a lot less of the way you just described it, Andrea, which feels that would be lovely to feel like, okay, we're in this together. We're going to find out what does work, what doesn't work for our students. What do we need to change and do and try something new and see if that works. And that feels a lot different than that old accountability model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to stretch a little bit what Andrea was saying, because first of all, Andrea is the leader that we want to cookie cutter, put in the oven, bake, and spread around everywhere. Right. Well, and let me just say this, and I can say this because I know Andrea. She's a leader like many other leaders that had an opportunity to stop, slow down, and be able to think about the supporting of that. But if we're going to get real, right, we're going to get real about what is actually happening, especially now in education, right? Okay, so Andrea hit on something. The average teacher, when they go through teacher preparation program, is not given an opportunity to dig down deep into the underpinnings and the mechanics of teaching reading. Okay,
which is crazy.
Think about all the other professions. Would you allow a plumber to come into your house that has never seen the underside of a faucet? Right?
Not at all.
And that we go in, we allow teachers to get certified, including myself. I'm putting myself out there. We allow folks to get certified, get into the teaching of reading, and they have yet to understand how it works. So that's the teacher. So your average leader, if they're lucky, gets a pass through teaching before they lead, some not. And so if that's the standard form, by the time you're a leader, you haven't had the opportunity to study the science of reading, the mechanics. You don't have that. And so that then begets, let's look a little bit higher, at the system leader. Most system leaders have not had an opportunity to understand the mechanics. You might have some that dove deep into it because they were reading specialists that have a love for it. But at the end of the day, there are more often leaders who don't have that underpinning. So what ends up happening? They go by the standard of education. And what I mean by that is what is actually happening now. Sometimes what is happening in education is ran by research and development. But if we're honest, sometimes it's the turn of the wheel. We all know what that turn of the wheel is. And at the end of the day, they choose curriculum. They choose material really blindly, if we're being honest. And so what Andrea is calling out is for leaders to pause. And when I say leaders, I mean from the teacher all the way up through the system, and to ask yourselves, number one, what in fact is this reading curriculum? Are these materials philosophically sitting on? What in fact are they, through their own systems, right? What in fact are they pushing to our children? And when you start to ask leaders those questions, that's where you can begin to get them to dig down and understand that you quite possibly, your system, your school system, could have adopted a reading curriculum, a reading program that is yielding the abysmal results that you are getting. It's not the children. It's not even, I'm not even going to say that it's the teachers who don't have the greater understanding. It could be the philosophical beliefs that reading program is pushing. So you got a reading program that's based on 3 Qs. Okay, because my grandmother used to say, let's tell the truth and shame the devil. That you've made a decision, okay, to adopt a reading program that is based off of, I hate this phrase, give it your best guess. Mm-hmm. Best guess the letter sound, best guess the picture word recognition. And the best guessing falls back to, we're real now, the preparation that the child has had. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of that preparation, unfortunately, probably did not happen in school. And so I'd like to start there and getting leaders from the classroom all the way up to really dig down and ask themselves, what in fact does this believe in? And once they begin to recognize that, then they can begin to ask themselves an even harder question. Okay, what is 3Qing? I have so many leaders that are like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Wow.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? We have leveled readers. And I'm like, okay, so tell me what the purpose is of a leveled reader. The kids can choose their own books. Like, there's not enough of us opening up, and this is what Andrea is talking about in this process, opening up avenues for us to really tell the truth about where our knowledge is and where it should be in service of the children that walk into our school buildings.
And Lacey, that's so, I think that's so evident if we look at what the research says. 1/3 of 4th graders, 1/3 are at grade level. I was reading a study from the National Center of, I think it was Educational Statistics in 2019. And this was like pre-pandemic. So I don't even know what the numbers would be now. But it was almost the same for 8th and 12th graders. So to Lacey's point, we have the science of reading, which is 40 years of historical science-based evidence, information on how to move reading forward. And for some reason, a lot of the myths, like Lacey said, the 3Qing system, or let's just take the best guess looking at the picture, or kids naturally learn to read, so give them a lot of text. Those type of mindsets still exist. And until we can break through, and that's a part of what we do here at Unbound Ed through the GLEAM process, which I think Lacey will get into a little bit later, but helping to change the mindset around what it takes to actually do the work in the way we know is right for kids, and especially our kids who are most marginalized most often.
Mm-hmm. And can I say something controversial? Okay, hold on to your seats.
I'm ready.
And where, in fact, should the purpose of the 3Qing system lie? Because here's the thing that I've been saying, like, the war is over. There really was no war, okay? The problem is that because we're not armed with enough knowledge about how you learn how to read, which is around the research and the development, and the pedagogical moves that it takes, we don't always consider the both and. Okay, so I have a child who got started with those 5 elements of reading. And you know what? This is a literacy podcast. So if you don't know what the 5 elements are, I want you to make a note of something and go find out, because Miss Lacey's not going to tell you this morning. You're going to have to go research it yourself. I might say it a little later. So I have a child that started out with a program that had the strong 5 elements for reading. Okay. Now, sure. Are they as they're becoming fluent readers and they're moving up in the reading, is there a cueing system they may use? Well, absolutely, because they have the foundation for fluency. And it's not an either or. And I think that part of our the way that phases that we're in education is that when we really begin to understand about the mechanics of reading, we understand where the place and purpose for all those pieces are. We understand that, if we're honest, people have capitalized on the ignorance that we've held about what it takes to read. And we boil it down to choosing either or instead of understanding around the both and. I know that was so controversial. Some people may have hung up the podcast, but it's
come back, pick the line back up, because I think you're spot on. Like, we know that phonics should be systematic and explicit, but if you're in oral comprehension and you're doing a listening of a book walk, could you use a 3 cueing system in a way that is actually beneficial for that moment? Yes. Is that the primary way to teach kids how to read? I don't want to curse on the podcast, but heck, no. Like, I totally agree. Like, but again, to your point, Lace, how do we scale up from the district leaders all the way through to the teacher lens so that we have a vertical articulation of understanding of what it takes to get us the right level of information to then produce what our kids need for the science of reading?
Yeah. Andrea, David Lieben has already been on, so we've totally had some cursing happen, so don't worry about it. and I wanted to actually jump in. I'm sitting here, and I just have, I don't know if you can see, I have Presley's MCAP, and on the state of Maryland, which I don't give much weight to this, but I do want, for many reasons, but I did want to share that 76% of third graders in Maryland approach expectations, which is that bar for the not like approach. And I will say my child included, as a mom who is working full time and doing my best to give her supplemental what she needs. It's really hard. But I will say, I did kind of want to share that, like, this is not something that you're just talking about that is happening like somewhere where we don't live, right? Like, so I always think everybody thinks it's like, oh, it's somewhere else. It's not my district. Like, to the parents listening, to the teachers listening, like, this may be your district, but to give an example, like, I talked with a 4th grade teacher. My daughter's in 4th grade, talked with a 4th grade teacher over the weekend who wants to teach using science of reading in our current district, right? So to have the high quality materials, she sees that, but the district leaders are steeped in the 3 cueing system. We currently have Calkins and leveled reading happening. And one of the teacher who I was speaking with even shared that one of the district leaders wears like an I Love Lucy shirt for Lucy Calkins. And that to me was like the epitome of, okay, we have to think about how these systems are affecting the teachers who are in front of the students. And then they're being told they're doing things wrong. The students are doing things wrong. It's not fair, especially when the teacher has the knowledge and, like you said, Lacey, has the knowledge and the research. And she knows what the right thing is to do and cannot do it. And that is where I think empowering our teachers to stand up and say, this is not right. That it's so angering, and so frustrating on so many levels.
I also want to add to that, Lori, that I have a friend who's in a graduate program right now for a reading specialist, and all of her instructors are leaders from the same district Lori's talking about. And so she is hearing all about balanced literacy in her master's degree program. And she comes to me and is like, wait, I thought this was not science of reading. Like, what's going on here? And so, it perpetuates that, right? The teachers that are learning from the same people that hold these beliefs it just keeps trickling down.
Yeah, I call it the old iOS system. It's like your cell phone, right? It's like Apple sending out a message saying, we're going to go back to the beeper operating system for your cell. What? No. It's the old iOS. And here's the thing. This is about to be this is about to be a controversial podcast. I'm gonna tell y'all right now. So I'm gonna admit something.
Okay, we're here for it.
Never admit it publicly. I actually worked for the Reading and Writing Project. I put myself through graduate school working with Lucy Calkins at the project, and I will tell you this. The thing that I want teachers to really hold on to and leaders to really hold on to is that just like a parent, you instinctually have an understanding of what is actually serving your children. You know that. And I could say that through that work, I met so many leaders and educators who were like, this is nice. Okay. And I'm going to tell you why I think they like the iOS system. If we're going to be real, first of all, it explicitly tells you how to set up your classroom. Honey, I could arrange a reading and writer workshop classroom like no other. My room was beautiful. I could create a level book room that would just make your head spin. I could color code. My kids knew their colors, their dots, the best guess. I could explain how you put a book on like a pair of pants. I knew it hands down. It taught me as an educator the organization, right, of a reading program, which
the easy stuff, Lacey, easy stuff.
Right. Yeah. Which, if we're being real, you never got in your teacher preparation, right? So finally somebody hands you the menu, right? But they don't tell you what the ingredients is. They don't tell you if the chef decided to use gluten-free or gluten, products. They just give it to you. And so the old iOS system is what leaders and teachers hold on to. And what I'm proposing is that we as a edu environment get together and tell the truth. Okay, you want to know how to reframe it with the science of reading? We can do that. We can do that. It goes back to what Andrea was saying around creating the avenues to get into the discussions, to read the articles, to come back and say, okay, so what about this reading workshop do I keep? What exactly do I stand up in my classroom? And what exactly, through the science of reading, can I utilize within this workshop model to support my students? And so I think that what I really want educators to know and to understand is, one, if there are educators out there who are submersed themselves in that workshop and they know it's not working for their kids, tell the truth. Tell the truth.
So, Lacey, if it's not working, what does that look like? Like, are teachers supplementing a lot of stuff? Like, can we call out what that? Sorry, I started yelling. I got excited. What does that look like? Oh my God! Tell us what.
It's okay. I'm gonna tell you what it looks like. It looks like the educator that I spoke to last week, who told me that she is. I'm not gonna say where she is, but she is a bilingual teacher that is supporting students who are mostly from a Latinx background, and that she is forced to use the Readers and Writers Workshop, and where her students are best guessing their books. And she's also being told she's not allowed to speak Spanish. She shuts the door, and she speaks both Spanish and English. She shuts the door, and she prints off the explicit, systematic, cumulative phonics program that her and I talked about. She makes sure that her workshop centers are also supporting the materials that is used in that systematic, explicit, cumulative phonics program. And so am I saying she went rogue? Yes, she went rogue. Am I telling teachers to go rogue and throw caution to the wind and don't worry about keeping their job? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this teacher grew her knowledge around the best practices to support multilingual children. And she has made decisions on how to balance those practices within the reading program that is being pushed in her system. And do you know what happened? When she started getting the results and the principal said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Let me invite you in and show you." She didn't go in saying, come see what I'm doing. And I think it takes a lot of audacity, it's not easy to do. I'm not telling people that everybody has to do it, but it takes a lot of audacity to begin to build your background knowledge and to understand how you can incorporate it within that.
They should make me think too about what we know from ed reports. And so sometimes we have to let the data do the heavy lifting. Lace just named a way that the teacher allows the data to do that. But also if you're in a graduate program that is pushing for something that we know is not even green lit, totally red lit, how can you share this information to help the people who are bringing it to you better understand so that they are equipped to know what it is that they're presenting? That to me is one way that you can do it in a way that is not necessarily easy, but question and advocate for what you know is right so that it'll help lead to a different result. Mm-hmm. And what we see often, though, is teachers, even with the best intent, when they realize what you said, Lori, like this isn't working, what they try to create are materials that still don't work because they break the coherence of even the program that they have that isn't working. And so how do we set teachers up to spend their time not necessarily replicating, creating materials, pulling erroneously off of things like Teacher Pay Teacher, but finding open education resource supplements like Lacey said that teacher did to pull in that actually are what we require and what is needed for the change we want to see.
And I have a question they could start with. I have a question. Go to your teachers, your colleagues, or even the leader in your building, and you say, what is the intention of this reading program? Starting with that question alone will spur up people pausing and asking. And when you get the rundown of materials, well, it has this. No. What's the intention behind the teaching of reading of this program? And teachers don't necessarily have to know that answer, but finding the answer to it as a collective group will begin to open up avenues of discussion.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And it's making me think about if I was using high quality materials, like what would the quote optimal answer be, right? Or what would a really solid answer to that question be? And I'm just thinking in my head, one of the responses might be knowledge building. Another one might be systematic, explicit phonics, right? Another one might be complex texts. So I'm just thinking of like throwing a couple answers out there so that we have some guideposts for those listening. You know, what would be a great answer to that question? Those are a couple things. If you're on Ed Reports, all greens are not created equal, as we talked about in a previous podcast, but green is a great start. And then digging in real deep to get down to the nitty gritty on Ed Reports is helpful. And of course, our friends at Unbound Ed have incredible resources to help too. So,
yeah, Lacey gave us as an organization a part of our vision for ensuring that we are able to encourage educators to actively work together to disrupt systems that are not beneficial for kids, especially those who are marginalized kids of color, is through what we use at Unbound Ed called our GLEAM process. And GLEAM, it just makes me twinkle when I say it. I always think about teeth whitening for some reason. But it's
such
great.
A positive acronym.
It is. And it started off something totally different. Lacey can share that too. But GLEAM is, to your point, Lori, is the foundation is grade level. We know grade level is the underpinning, and that's what we see in Green Lit, but it is not what we need for, not just what we need for all kids. So how do we also make a curriculum engaging, affirming, and meaningful so that kids can see themselves in the curriculum, can learn how to advocate and have agency around what's happening within their local context? Their linguistic piece that Lace mentioned earlier is brought into the curriculum. So through our GLEAM process, we help teachers change and leaders think through a mindset shift and what it means to enact grade level instruction in a way that's engaging, affirming, and meaningful, and plan differently. So then we can see a different result in the instructional delivery, which changes the experience for the students and yields better results.
Yep. Yeah. And I think Lori, I think when you went to answer the question, I was like, okay, she's going to make me say it. So comprehension, right? Fluency, vocabulary, phonics, and phonemic awareness. Those should be.
There's your
five. What? Okay, that was your pop quiz. That was the answer. You wrote down the pop quiz. You got all 5 of those. You got it right. But those should be the elements that you're looking for. And here's the other thing. As you're thinking about those 5 elements I just named, as a teacher, as a leader, as a team of teachers, beginning to ask the question around what does each one of those elements describe? What's the purpose of it? How do I know that a child is leaning into the comprehension of the grade level text, right? Or another way to check is to think about the kind of conversations that you have about how the child is doing in class. You all know this. You, as a teacher, the parent says, oh, they're struggling. Like, oh, well, you know what? She is just the best, classmate. She works with her classmates really well. She really comprehends the stories. I mean, when I ask a question, her hand is the first to go up. Okay, that's great. That's 1 out of 5. Okay. But if in the parent teacher conference, in the parent reporting, You don't talk about the success of the fluency rate with the child. You don't talk about the evidence that the child understands the phonics or has the phonemic awareness. You don't talk about how the child devours and then regurgitates the vocabulary. That's a problem. And so I think the other side of this conversation is looking at our parents as partners and cueing our parents up at the beginning of school of the look forwards that they should be leaning on, particularly in the early grades as their children are gaining, their reading skills.
Lacey, I love that. We used to have parent meetings that we would, I don't want to say trick parents, but I mean, for lack of a better word, we would have kids do talent shows and then have a conversation with the parents about where the kids were performing at the end of the show. So we had them there. Let's get you in the door so that we can get the parents there. And then how do we then do exactly what Lacey just said? And even for the upper grades, we know the 5 components for the science of reading, but written expression, what does it look like and where are your kids performing? Because it's all interrelated and ties together for a whole literacy experience. So totally agree.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I know I'm thinking back to my days as a teacher and honestly not having the most strategic conversations with parents because it mostly revolved around behavior, like they're wonderful or like we're having some struggles here. Or just like, are they turning in the work, right? So do they have a good grade in class because they're getting their work done or are they not, right? And it often revolved much more around that than it did around the actual skills they need to be a good reader. And I'm just being honest and vulnerable myself of like that was what most of the parent conferences focused on.
Yeah. I've apologized a lot to my early students. I'm like, please forgive Ms. Rockwood and her first couple years of teaching because yes, you want parents to understand that they have helped develop good citizens for the school. But do you know how many good citizens are in the world who are illiterate? Or let's talk about the good citizens where research tells us that despite what you put in front of them, they will become moderate readers. But do you know what a moderate reading rate gets you? That's tutoring, that's subsequent extra coursework in college. And if I'm really telling the truth and shaming the devil this morning, part of the reason why this is the world according to Lacey, we struggled so much over these past 2 years is that the word is easily passed and not read, right? Like I can accept the word that is passed on social media about what it means to have a vaccine or vaccination or what a virus is and what's a pandemic. But how many folks boiled down and read the science articles? Read even if it was the newspaper and used critical reasoning. Part of the reason why I believe part of our struggle is that a nation of moderate readers relies on word that's passed and word that's not necessarily read. And listen, my culpability is in it as well. And I think that as a nation, we have to stop and ask ourselves, is this what we're trying to evolve to?
That's so profound. Melissa,
and
it
can be messy. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead, Andrea. I was just thinking it could be messy. It gets messy.
It made me think too about the importance when I was listening to Melissa and I was thinking back to teaching, the importance of the first teach. So often we rely on supplemental materials. And if we highlight, or if I was highlighting, I would highlight things that were related, even though now knowing some of those supplemental materials didn't even align to the same philosophy as the materials that I was teaching in the original, and that we only do what we know. So how, as a leader, did I set up or not set up teachers to say, okay, this is why we're using these materials. These are how these materials align. And when you have those conferences, you set these as the parameters of what your conferences are about. I'll say I didn't do that well enough then because I didn't know. And to Lacey's point, I hadn't read the information enough to understand. And so no more, do better.
Yeah. And also think about your reading pullout programs. How many conversations are there where leaders are asking, again, what's the intent behind the reading pullout materials versus the intent behind the classroom materials? I recently had was involved in an advocacy parent-teacher conference about a young lady who does not have the all 5 essential elements. She's about to go into 3rd grade. I had to pull the emergency brake and tell her parents, like, stop everything. This is an emergency. And when I spoke to the staff at the school, it wasn't until I asked that question about the intent of the materials that I asked them to grapple with how both of those materials philosophically were working against each other. Right. And how even the materials that they had chosen for the pull out extra reading hour that this child was getting wasn't even fully immersed in the 5 elements. It just skimmed the surface of phonics and phonemic awareness. And like, until we had a deep conversation about that, it wasn't noticed. Now, the reading specialist knew it. And the reading specialist had said, I've tried to be an advocate in this system for us to reconsider, but all of the other teachers, including the 1st-year classroom teacher, was not aware of it. And so I think it's that level of conversations that has to happen.
Lacey, can you give an example there of like how the 2 programs were competing against each other?
Yes, and I try really hard not to name the programs.
Yeah.
Okay? So
listen, we've already named them today, so no, I'm just kidding.
So one was a leveled reader program that the 1st-year teacher was using in the classroom with her 108 minutes of readers workshop with the guided reading, groups and the leveled books. And the other was a program that was based out of, I'm sorry, I have it reversed. The classroom program was based out of the 3Qing, okay? Which is why the 1st-year teacher, when we asked about how the student was progressing, her comment was, if she would just slow down and take her best guess. If she would just slow down and think and take her best guess. Where the pull-out teacher was using a program that was based off of leveled readers that had some sort of dibbling and dabbling in the 5 elements, but was missing a lot of substantive materials and work around the phonemic awareness system and phonics. Right. And so these 2 systems, right, the child was being doused in the 3Q regular, then she was being pulled out, and it wasn't really getting at her fluency. And so, and the other interesting thing is neither program had even matching themes. So I'm in my classroom learning about city life, right? And then I get pulled out and I'm learning about bunnies. Like, it just doesn't, which, I think that alone should make people pause and think. When I asked the reading specialist, she said, Ms. Robinson, I know what you're talking about. I've been asking the system to do this now since I've gotten in this system. And what I wanted to say in that conference, but I didn't want to say is, what I want you to do then is take the knowledge that you have and take it to that 1st-year teacher. Because that 1st-year teacher, by saying, if she would just slow down and think, you all, who doesn't think when they're reading?
No, and the kids who are struggling think the most.
I know. It's impossible to turn your brain off to say, don't think, and even with the slowing down and take your best guess, what?
Yeah. But I'm thinking, like, how painful is that in the long run of, like, I'm going to have to really slow down and think that hard through my whole life reading. Imagine when I'm getting to chapter books and really tough books in high school. We have to just sit and think and guess what these words are.
Yeah, which is the opposite of what we want. Yeah. But that we want the automaticity to come into play. And so them having to do that heavy lift keeps them from being able to comprehend. And that is the crux that we
Yes, but now that child thinks that slowing down is the quote, like, right way to read, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
I always think about that, like, that impact long term. Sorry, Lacey, go ahead. That's my heart's so sad.
Yeah, and I was going to say not only that, but the child had her words taped all over her entire room, on the ceiling, on the bedpost, on the bed frame, where there should have been pictures of princesses and unicorns and mermaids. She had words taped everywhere because they had convinced her that if you would just memorize the words, you would become a better reader. But I want to say this. I want to give this disclaimer. I'm not faulting. Here's what I want to say. I'm not faulting that first year teacher. I'm not faulting the teachers in that building. What I'm saying is, as an edu space, we have got to get better about understanding the mechanics of reading. There's enough material out there, including OER material that you don't have to purchase, that you yourself can go and get smarter about. And we have got to get together as a community and put some pressure, on our teacher preparation programs. It's got to stop. We have got to demand that teachers are getting an opportunity to dig down into the mechanics of reading as they are going along their either traditional or non-traditional teaching prep program.
Yeah, and Lacey, I would just add, and just thinking about the teachers who are in that building with that reading specialist, how is the system, the principal or the coaches being set up for success so that the students who have the largest need are with the people who have the greatest expertise? Because often we see it as the opposite. The brand new teacher has the children who have the greatest challenges versus what we would want was someone who has that knowledge to be able to instill it in the kids so we can catch them up as much as possible, as quickly as possible. Those are like the systems and structures that leaders need to know to put in place to ensure that the kids are being served in the right way.
And Melissa and Lori, you were queuing this up a few minutes ago. And I want to say this. We focus on the most students who've had the most disenfranchisement, right? And the data tells us that it is our students of color and our students who are in low SES communities, okay? But here's the real fact. I talk to educators across socioeconomic school systems. I talk to educators that are living in the most, I would say, high SES areas. And leaders tell me in those areas, these kids don't read. They look at the picture. They have words memorized. It is actually a national crisis. And what I say is, if as a nation, our students are struggling as readers, our students have, a reading cold, then our students of color have the reading flu. Because we know about the compounded, right, disenfranchisement that they have been dealing with for generations, and the beliefs that many of us implicitly, sometimes unfortunately explicitly, believe about our students. And so I think that it's important for people to understand that when we say the science of reading, when people say phonics, it's not just students of color, students of language acquisition, students in low SES communities. We're talking about everybody. Because if not, I'm really going to step on some toes. Why would you find parents having to pay to get their kids?
That's right. That's right. Right.
And a lot of parents.
A lot of parents. We're paying for additional tutoring services outside of schools. Those parents are the ones who have the social economic status, as Lacey was saying. A lot of those parents may be more apt to know how to advocate and provide those resources for the kids, but all kids deserve that same opportunity, regardless of their socioeconomic status.
And I want to add to it has to be that right intervention, that right extra service. What I think sometimes we do is we think about the intervention or that extra service or that tutoring, and we don't address that main problem, right? So like the main issue is the tier 1 core curricula. And if we have that right, then the sliver, it becomes very small for those who may need extra services. And then the extra services also have to be research-based, right? Scientifically aligned. So when we think about it as a core issue versus like an intervention issue, like I just want to name that's really important to think about. Like I know we're talking intervention right now and services, but we have to also get at the root of it. If kids keep getting sick, right? And we keep giving them prescriptions over time, that prescription is, we can't give them, penicillin every time. It's going to stop working. Yep. And that's happening. So we have to get at the root of it and figure out what's happening at the root. What's the root cause? Change that. And then go ahead. And we have less kids to work with who are, in our struggling group, because they're truly outliers because the system is working for them. Mm-hmm. And that's what I hope that teachers and district leaders and school leaders take away from this conversation, this really powerful conversation today.
Absolutely. Well, we are almost out of time, unfortunately. I think we could keep talking to you both for a very long time, but we just want to ask if there is one piece of advice that you'd like to leave for our audience. So to the leaders out there, who include our teachers and school and system leaders, is there one last piece of advice that you would leave for them?
Well, Andrea mentioned it earlier, so I'm going to leave with the framework we've been leaning on. And that's our GLEAM framework, because what we recognize is that even with the green lit materials, right, there is an absence of understanding around the way those materials are supposed to work. And I want to name the culturally relevancy that those materials should hold. So we ask educators to consider our GLEAM framework, which means, is it grade level? Is it engaging? And we don't mean just rigorous and productive struggle. We mean, is it engaging for the students? Does it lean on their local, historical, contextual, linguistical, cultural heritage? So how are they being invited into those lessons? Is it affirming? Is it affirming for the child academically? So does it, what you're putting before them, ask them to use the prerequisite skills they gained before they came in, and ask them to understand not only what they're being taught, but how to think about what they're thinking about being taught? And is it affirming for who they are? Who they are as their whole selves, who they are as their ethnic, linguistic selves, and is it meaningful? Are we conveying to our students that what you're learning right now, sweetheart, becoming a better reader, getting fluent, you will eventually be able to take back and not only make your life better, your community better, your family better, but quite possibly this world a better place. And we sit on the shoulders of Gloria Ladson Billings, who was the mother of all culturally relevant teaching, as we formulated our GLEAM hypothesis. So that's what I would leave for them. I don't know if you would agree with that, Andrea, or have anything to add.
Only what your favorite phrase is, and remembering that justice lies in the details of teaching and learning. Lacey Robinson coined that phrase for us, and that justice comes in from what Dr. Maya Angelou says. You do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, you do better. So do better by your kids.
Thank you both. Yeah. I know. I hope that down the road, 10 years from now, 2 years from now, 1 year from now, I hope that no teachers have to apologize. That's, I think, what we're all working for. We don't want to have to apologize to our students. We want to do right by them the first time. So thank you both for being here. Thank you for your incredible advice and all of this really intentional conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening, literacy lovers. Remember, we have a new episode out every Friday, and we send a super helpful newsletter with follow-up content each Tuesday.
Be sure to visit our website to subscribe to our newsletter and podcast. It's literacypodcast.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Literacy Podcast.
And please reach out with questions or ideas for podcast episodes. We love hearing from you. Melissa, what's our email address?
Melissa and Lori at literacypodcast.com.
We are so glad you're here to learn with us.